Okay, good evening, everyone. Good evening. Today is Tuesday, February 25th. With 63 members present out of a 100-person body, we have a quorum. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Before I hand it over to your moderator, Seth Morton, I have two announcements. The first, I'd like to welcome the three newest members to the RTM, one of whom was caucused in just tonight, and the other two were recently sworn in. So when I say your name, if you don't mind standing, hold your applause. We'll get the three over. The first two, starting in District 5, I'd like to welcome Debbie McGarren, Anna Lohman, and then in District 3, we have Doug Kreutz, I apologize, and welcome, Doug. A member, a whole of 5 minutes. So welcome all. On the other side, in District 6, we had one resignation of Peter Myopoulos. Peter moved out of Darien, so as you know, you may no longer be a member of the RTM if you're not an elector of the town. So there is a vacancy in District 6 for anyone watching TV 79, or if anyone knows anyone who resides in District 6, please contact Frank Edelman as soon as possible. He will be calling his district to caucus shortly. His contact information is on the website. Feel free to contact me, and all the streets, addresses in town that belong to District 6 can be found on the website if there's any questions. So again, we have one vacancy left in District 6, and now I will hand the podium over to your moderator, Seth Morton.
Thank you, Krista. A belated Happy New Year to you all. Welcome. For new members, welcome again. The only thing I would sort of give to you at the opening of our sessions for the new year, late as they might be, is Robert's rules and decorum between ourselves in dealing with each other with respect, and in dealing with the public. There are 100 of us spread out all over town, and likely to be the first recipients of questions about what's going on in town or how something works. And we're in a privileged position in that we know a little more than everybody else. And so part of our job is relations with others and providing help as we can and as we understand it. So I pass that along to you. Without objection to that, I'll accept the agenda. Is there any objection? Next is approving the minutes for December 9. Can I have a motion in favor, please? And a second? Thank you. Any corrections, additions? I hear not. Sounds like all those in favor of approving the minutes say aye. Aye. Opposed? I hear none. Abstentions? I see none. Next item on the agenda is 2501, approving the gift for the Mather Center of $25,504. Speaking on behalf of Public Health and Safety, Mac Patrick.
Hi, I'm Mac Patrick, District 5. I chair Public Health and Safety. I move Resolution 25-1, audio and visual equipment gift of $25,504. Do I have a second? Thank you. Without objection, I will waive the reading of the resolution. This gift is from the Darien Foundation. The equipment consists of 2 projectors, 2 screens, 1 ViewSonic interactive screen, a microphone, wireless speakers, an amplifier, and a laptop. The equipment will be installed in the Mather Center and used to enhance and expand upon current services. The new audiovisual equipment will allow members to see slides better during presentations. It will allow for lunch and learn style programs as another screen can be put on the stage in the cafeteria. Also, it will allow for larger scale presentations in the cafe, especially health, government, wellness themed programs. It will allow staff to use other rooms for lectures with slides, as the ViewSonic screen is portable. The screen can be brought up to the second floor exercise room for virtual exercise classes. The equipment that will be provided that enhances sound is especially important for those with hearing challenges. The volume capability is vital, but even more important is the improvement in the clarity of sound, which will be invaluable. So our committee met tonight with 7 members present with a quorum, and we voted unanimously to approve this gift, and we asked the full RTM to do the same. Thank you.
Speaking on behalf of the Finance and Budget Committee, Jack Davis.
I'm Jack Davis, District 3 Chair of the RTM Finance and Budget Committee. Mac, thank you for that excellent report. The only thing I'm going to add is that even though this appears to be a small gift, any gift over $12,500 requires both Board of Selectmen and RTM approval, and that's why we have it before us. The RTM Finance and Budget Committee voted unanimously in favor of this resolution and recommends the same to the full RTM. Thank you.
Are there any other committees wish to report? Seeing none. Public officials? Okay. Members of the body, questions? Electors of the town? Ready to vote? All in favor, please rise. Opposed? And abstentions? Okay, next item on the agenda is update on Great Island. Speaking as our representative to the Great Island Committee, Mark Adaletta.
Good evening. You ready there? Good evening. Mark Adaletta, District 5, and your elected representative to the Great Island Advisory Committee. Tonight I will provide an update on the activities of the GIAC since my last report. By way of background, recall that at the January 22nd GIAC meeting, the Great Island Vision Plan was posted to the website and reviewed. Ms. Sturgis of Reed Hildebrand provided an overview of the plan and explained that it summarizes the path. She shared that it was fairly clear that the direction from the public was to balance access with engagement, with preservation, and to protect the coastal edges of the environment. This plan was a culmination of a 6-month effort by the GIAC in collaboration with the team of consultants led by Reed Hildebrand. You will recall that this included 2 co-located and widely attended workshops in the fall. Both had sessions in Town Hall and on Great Island for increased accessibility. These included tours, maps, site models, input boards, and then followed by 2 electronic surveys. Public participation in both was immense. I thank this group gathered here today for their work in getting the word out, and many of you who participated as well. Next slide. Thank you. The workshop and survey in September, which had 2,374 respondents, was designed to aid the design team and the Great Island Advisory Committee in understanding what the community members thought Great Island could or should be. The second workshop, which had a survey that followed in 1,573 respondents, was focused on building from the key priorities identified in the first survey. The second survey consisted of 8 general topic areas: passive recreation, active recreation and water access, history and structures of Great Island, ecology, conservation, restoration, access to Great Island, dogs on Great Island, programming and governance for Great Island, and vision and direction. Of these 8 general topics, respondents to the second survey indicated broad preference for access and activation, ecological conservation, and historical preservation. In parallel, please recall I noted previously that there were focus groups made up of representatives from local organizations, individuals with specific specialties, that's redundant, or responsibilities, continue providing input around areas. These areas included also ecology, education, transportation, governance, and history and preservation. This vast amount of input was processed and presented by Reed Hildebrand throughout the period. Critical conditions around access, building codes, coastal regulations, ecology, field observations, etc., were identified and reviewed. Overall, it is clear the public is highly interested in accessibility, walking paths, community gathering spaces, protecting natural beauty, and the repurposing or preserving of structures which have historic or architectural significance. Key themes emerged as the effort progressed. 1, public access, respecting the ecology of the island. Offer diverse learning and recreational opportunities for all ages, and honor the island's history while considering the coastal resilience. The GIAC eventually evaluated information as it was released and actively provided feedback and input. This culminated with the release of this vision plan that I noted. Those of you that have been tracking the process regularly, the postings to the town website under advisory appointments, Great Island Advisory Committee, or if you've been viewing the activities on Channel 79 know that this 32-page plan is quite detailed. I encourage anyone interested to go see it. I think, is the website up there? Yeah, it is up there. This document distills design and community feedback into key recommendation areas. Weighing these areas will help determine the correct amount of investment and time needed to actualize these ideas. These key areas are community activation, create engagement, develop community, and promote fiscal opportunities and offering. Universal design, expand and enhance the experience for all types of users. Conservation, steward sensitive ecologies for future generations and inspire engagement with nature. And finally, historical preservation, thoughtfully adapt and repurpose significant structures guided by historical research aligned with the community input to honor, again, the heritage of Great Island. Finally, the vision plan notes the primary responsibility of Great Island is to serve the town of Darien and its residents. To become a successful public space, Great Island must establish a sustainable and resilient approach to management and revenue generation to support the Great Island into the future. To manage Great Island, meet conservation goals, and offer successful programming, a mix of funding and financing options are needed to cover costs. Several not-for-profit, public, and public-private partnership governance models have been presented and reviewed by the GIAC. To be clear, none has been selected. This decision will ultimately be influenced by the master plan and the concept phase that we are just now entering. If you go to the next slide. Thank you. The January 22nd meeting also marked the launch of the master plan and concept design. This phase is expected to take approximately until June of this year. At the subsequent meeting, February 13th, this master plan design criteria was presented and again is available at the website. This phase will also include 2 public workshops, one focused on preliminary ideas and the second dedicated to concept design. Note the focus group sessions also continue through this phase. Several areas were highlighted in this design criteria. One was circulation and parking. Some of the items identified were separate vehicular and pedestrian routes with continuous looping circuits for each. Concepts like restricted circulation, interwoven circulation, and extended vehicular circulation approaches were evaluated and presented. Another, provide sufficient parking for events possible for Great Island. Nothing specific decided yet. Provide fire emergency ADA access, minimize impacts to woodlands and sensitive areas, and locate parking within areas not core to the experience of Great Island, outside the important view sheds. With regard to the architecture, another area covered, ensure building safety and code compliance, of course. Upgrade mechanicals and electrical and plumbing system as needed. Accommodate potential new programming. Identify and abate hazardous materials and address structural defects. Improve energy efficiency and carbon footprint where possible. Integrate architecture and landscape design, and preserve and restore historic features and materials and character where appropriate. With respect to coastal conservation, another area identified. Utilize sensitive design for access and experience to avoid any further degradation to the ecological communities. Focus recreational and educational opportunities on scenarios that are compatible with ecological conservation goals. Restore and enhance native flora and fauna, and limit development and activation to areas historically affected by site activity and uses in the past. Under the category of regulatory, another area identified. Locate any proposed structures, site features, or infrastructure outside regulated areas. That may seem obvious, and that includes wetland uplands, inland wetlands, floodplains, coastal setbacks, etc. Propose site development in harmony with existing coastal features and in accordance with the Connecticut Coastal Management Manual. Identify the zoning requirements for selected scenarios. The scenarios are TBD at this point, and coordinate with local zoning staff around such. Under another category, utilities and stormwater. Identify utility loads that are needed for the various scenarios. Design stormwater systems in accordance with the Connecticut Water Quality Manual. Incorporate low-impact green stormwater infrastructure, and design utilities to be underground to the maximum extent practical to maintain unobstructed sight lines throughout the island. And then finally, the category of signage and pavilions. Items raised were things like signage should welcome visitors to the island. It should help visitors find their way around the island. Design should be simple, tasteful, cost-effective, and minimal impact to the island. With regard to pavilions, provide shelter from the elements at key points throughout the island. Provide space for gathering at key points throughout the island for resting, using the bathroom, filling water bottles, etc., as well as reorienting or reading maps. The signage should also connect people to the landscape through educational signage. Go to the next slide. So what this particular slide is showing is, I rattled through a lot there. And what they showed us is, as the different ideas and the different concepts are put forth, they put together these matrices. I know you can't really see this in this setting, but I wanted to give you a flavor for lots and lots of scenarios and combinations are being put together as the consultants try to guide the committee through this. Also covered at the February meeting was a follow-up to the bald eagle nesting at Great Island. The GIAC voted unanimously to a temporary bridle trail closure, was it February 1 through July 15th? Okay, well, why is it why the temporary trail closure? For those that don't know, we have a pair of bald eagles nesting on the island. Bald eagles apparently require undisturbed environment to successfully raise their young. This trail closure ensures they have the space we were told that they need, and this measure is based in part on the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection wildlife expert input received on one of his visits, or their visits. You go to the next slide. Thank you. Finally, I note that the first public engagement workshop of the master plan and concept design phase is this Saturday, March 1st. Sessions will be in Town Hall. This will be followed by another digital public survey. I encourage all the RTM members to reach out to fellow residents and invite them to attend this event. There will be fun activities for families, including a scavenger hunt and a story time hosted by the Darien Library. There'll be a second workshop further out in the schedule. Please continue to send any questions you may have to the GIAC mailbox, and we will continue to respond. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Next is a budget update from Chair of the Finance and Budget Committee, Jack Davis.
I'm Jack Davis, Chair of the RTM Finance and Budget Committee. This one will not be as short as the other one. Our budgets are here. The Board of Selectmen, Board of Ed have approved their proposed budgets and will be presenting them to the Board of Finance on Tuesday, March 4th. The RTM committee should already start looking at these budgets in areas of responsibility. Some already have. I know Park and Rec has. I know Public Works have. Before we go into talking about where they are in the budgets, I do believe that we should be talking about where they are in the first 6 months. So I'm going to start with the Board of Ed. As of the end of December, they were running a projected deficit of about $192,000. So why did this occur? There were two main events. One is we lost some federal funding, Title I, which last year was $151,000. The town's population needs to have at least a 2% poverty rate. Darien has a 1.5% poverty rate, and so we will not get funding back again until the next census, or if we're at a 2% poverty rate. We also lost Title V, which is a 2-year grant, and that cost about another $11,000. The second cause was every year as a safety net for the high costs of children receiving special services is excess cost reimbursement, better known as ECR. And in the last couple years, we've been getting about 70% reimbursement of eligible expenses. And there's a formula, the state determines what the average cost for our students are. You multiply that times 4.5, anything above that becomes eligible services. Unfortunately, the pool, which all towns submit, has not kept up with the number of submissions that are received by all the towns. And so the 70% estimated rate that they put in the budget for the current fiscal year, they were informed they're only getting 59.9%, which is a $287,000 potential loss of revenue that they have to find elsewhere. Now, there is a discussion this week. There's going to be a vote in Hartford to add another $40 million to the pool. It seems to be bipartisan. The effects on that on the fiscal year 25 budget is not known at this time. First of all, the vote hasn't taken place. But if there's anything that we can do is to remind all of our legislators, regardless of what side of the aisle, that they should be funding this pool because this is the safety net, not just for Darien, but for all towns that have students with high needs that are costing the town's money. As I said, overall, the deficit was about 192 at the end of December. There were some changes in out-of-district placements and other minor savings, and so at the end of January, that deficit is, projected deficit is now down to about 48,000. By the way, the other things that were in one of those things, I'm going to just speak so I don't need to read, was we had a half teacher in there. We also had some professional development, and we have some resource materials. They found other savings in their budget to pay for them for this year. So they did budget transfers, and all those that were in those grants are being done. However, when they did prepare the budget that everybody's going to start to review, those things were not added in. On the town side, it's a little too early to determine whether or not how much of a favorable budget we will have. Some of the highlights include, this I'll start reading again. Tax collections are consistent with prior years. At the end of December, it's about 62%. Again, I've mentioned frequently that every month the Board of Finance puts a packet. You go to their agenda, and there's a little blue button, it says financials. And everything that goes on in this town, every department, every bond, every contingency, everything is in that packet. So if you want to see the financials of the town, just go there, click on it. It's a real easy read, but it's a really nice thing to do. By the way, the same thing is done for the Board of Ed, where Rich Rudel does an analysis where it goes by every cost center. But that's where all this stuff is. Investment income was budgeted for $3.3 million. It looks like it's going to be about 20% greater than what was anticipated. Most budgets are running on a 5-year average on a close to schedule. In that report, they look at the 5-year average of what it's cost, what percentage of a budget has been spent historically and where we are now. That quickly identifies whether or not we're running behind something or we're running ahead of something. And it's really amazing, because I've said this several times. Our finance department basically has 3 or 4 people, and not only do they handle the town side, which is a $50 million business, they also handle all the payroll and some of the other expenses for the Board of Ed. So you have somebody doing payroll, expenses, and all this analysis, and we're doing it with very few people, and they do an absolute excellent job on that. Going a little more on this, elections was running a little bit of a deficit, which will probably come out of the Board of Finance contingency for about $33,000 because it cost us more than we anticipated. We lost our sales tax grant, and we're not budgeting it next year. That's been up and down by the state anyway. The fund balance is about $34 million, and some funds, as we'll talk about later, may be used to pay down capital projects, which gets transferred to the reserve fund for capital non-recurring expenditures, which, if those who've been here before, it's one of the first things we vote on every year, which is that transfer, and then we vote on our capital, because unless we transfer that in, the capital number's not going to jive. So it's time to start to work on our budgets and work from there. And so I'm going to go to the first slide. I'm not really going to talk about a lot of these numbers of what the budgets are, because it's just starting out. But yeah. There's only 2, so it's not that difficult. This was set up. We sent a corrected copy out. On the town operations, it's up about 4.8%. The library grant is about 3.4% increase. Debt service is up almost 20%. And remember, we haven't bonded for all of the HHR and some of the projects. Doesn't mean we can't afford it, but I'll allow that discussion to take care when John's here. The Board of Ed is up about 4.9%, which means our total expenses are up 5.9%, less revenues, which is down a little bit at this time at about 2%. There's not going to be a lot of changes to what we have here. The two that we do know that might occur is that we're going to be doing a bonding issue probably in April or May, and the revenue associated with that, less the drawdown, was not calculated in the investment income for the year, so there might be a slight adjustment there. And as discussed in the Board of Selectmen meeting, they are currently in negotiations with one part of their budget, and depending upon that outcome, that might also generate some additional savings here. But overall, the total tax as it stands today is up about 6.6%. Now, the other thing that I'll mention is, the last couple of years when our grand list was about $8.5 billion, it's now at 10, 11, we were having great increases in our grand list, which was generating incremental revenue of about $1.5 to $2 million, which just really spread the income. Now it only went up by 0.49%, which will generate about $700,000 to $800,000 of incremental income to spread it. So that will reduce some of this if you're trying to figure out what the mill rate is. The next chart is just where the capital is. And so I've broken it down into several things. First is the Board of Selectmen capital requests. There was a capital project that was added, which is, I have called it the dredging of the Black Lagoon, which is the Cherry Lawn Pond. So, I'm very happy that they added that back in, although I thought we could pay for it by every Halloween, just have somebody walk out of it. They did remove some analysis on employee living in town, but overall, the amount to be raised from taxes is about $4.9 million. There is some bonding that is being proposed. One of this will be addressing in our meeting next month, which is the retaining wall at Norotan Heights Fire Department for $2 million. During this year in January, the Board of Selectmen, after years of seeing all these off-cycle things come in, set some guidance for what can come in off-cycle. Both of the things that you're going to be dealing with this year qualify for that guidance because we knew what they were before. They had been discussed at prior budgets, and the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance was just waiting for the final estimates to go forward. The retaining wall is one of them. The other thing that we'll be dealing with also is a fire engine. It's not on this list, but it had been in the prior budget. We were waiting for some final things to go on there. I'm not going to get into anything other than when I first started this, 18 to 24 months, we had a fire engine. It then went to 3 years. We're now up to 4 years before we even seeing that fire engine coming to us. So that's something that they're dealing with the Fire Commission and John Zagrodzki. On the Board of Ed requests, the capital, I want to go to, there's some 3 projects that are out there on the 14 million that you see. It's 10 million for Pear Tree Point. There was a tour, if you weren't able to make in the freezing cold, that tour, and it was really cold. There is a film of it, and it's a lot warmer to watch it in your house than it was to be there. But it's about 10 minutes for Pear Tree Point. What it does not have is what it might cost us to dredge the channel. This is just the basin area and lifting, and quite honestly, it's something that we have to do I've always said that Weed Beach is Disney World and Pear Tree Point is Rye Playland, but even Rye Playland needs to be maintained, and this is time that we have to finally maintain this. The other two things that are coming down the road is the Weed Beach, which may have some changes on it. This will come post because there's still some items that may not be in our budget, and then there's yet another fire engine that will be coming through that we may not see at the time of budget. It may come post-budget. So that takes care of the $14 million. On the Board of Ed capital requests, they came in at $1.3 million. That includes doing some parking lots and some other minor things, replacing some trucks that are older than we are, because we seem to run trucks for like 30 years, 40 years here. There are some things that will happen on capital here. So hot off the presses, I got yesterday that the revenue generated, because that's a separate fund, so it earns money because we can invest that, is estimated to be about $300,000. And so that will offset some of the requested capital in that. There is something called the Reserve Fund for Capital Board of Finance Contingency, which is when we close out accounts, basically because the project's done. So if it has a little bit surplus, we move it in. If it needs a little bit money, it goes out of there. Right now, there's only about $178,000. They do close it out in September. There's another one coming out in March. I'm not anticipating a lot of funds coming from there to reduce it. Lastly, as I mentioned, there's the general fund to go there. And I debated whether or not I was going to say this, so I'm going to say it anyway. In the Board of Ed budget, there's over $1 million of federal grants still in that budget. And I'm not making a political comment one way or another, but there's a potential that that $1 million is at risk. So we will be talking from F&B to the Board of Finance that at least when we're trying to determine how much funds are available, that they may consider that and make an evaluation on that. Because quite honestly, with their budget, we're not finding $1 million. And if they do need it, we're going to do a special appropriation to cover that. The other thing that the Board of Finance and then the RTM can do subsequently is you can decide we're not doing a project. The Board of Finance could decide they're taking back my Black Lagoon issue, which we will argue about. But anybody in the Board of Finance or the RTM can remove a project from that. I'm not anticipating that's going to happen. And lastly is something else can be bonded. But the Board of Selectmen has been pretty outspoken about the fact that we really shouldn't be bonding things really that cost less than $1 million. At one time we were doing it, the rates were nothing, so it was like free money. But not that we can't afford it, we can. But I'm not anticipating that something that's currently on that list is going to be bonded. So it says that we'll have to come up with about some money to pay down the $5,900,000 either by transfers from the general fund to the capital account and that. So please go out, meet with the Board of Finance, people that you're assigned with, meet with your committees. I know, as I said, was there. At the end of the day, each committee, other than TGS&A, has to vote on 3 things before the budget meeting. One is an approval of the 5-year capital plan, which is now required for there, and it's a general capital plan. Then it's approval of your capital that's being requested by your areas of responsibility as put in by the scope document. And lastly is the operating budget. So that's what we're going to be doing. Concept is, if you have questions, we want to work with the Board of Finance. You want to get any concerns or any positive notes back to them prior to their vote in early April. It's hard to do things if the horse has left the barn, So it works better to work collaboratively now with the Board of Finance and get things done for all of us. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Jack. Little technical switching here. The results on item 2501, the Mather Center gift, 63 in favor, no noes, 1 abstention. Next, now that you're primed, now that you have finance on your mind, I offer you an address from the first Selectman, former chair of the Board of Finance, John Zagrodzki.
Thank you, Seth. I appreciate the chance to talk to you, so I'm going to wear both hats, Board of Finance and First Selectman tonight, to talk a little bit about town's indebtedness. So this is a little different kind of presentation. The genesis of this was me just kind of sitting back and thinking about the schools and Great Island and really thinking about the town's financial situation and the debt that we're incurring and will incur because we're spending money on those things. And so I started to talk to a few folks, some of you here, and said, well, you know what, I'll just do a video, like I do all these videos and these different topics. But then it occurred to me that this body has 2 unique and important features. The first feature is that I can't spend a dime unless it's appropriated by this body, and you tell me I can spend that dime. Like any legislative system, this body has the ultimate appropriating authority, and I know you guys take that very seriously. And so I wanted to come to this body to start talking about our debt situation directly. The second reason for doing this is you guys have one other unique feature, which is there are 100 of you, and they're in districts spread out all over town. I know a lot of people and talk to a lot of people. There is 0 chance that I know as many people as you do. And so when we have a discussion about the decisions that we're going to need to think about carefully with regard to the town's debt situation, this is going to kick off a process where you're going to be able to take this information and go talk to the people that you know, get their input and get their reaction and see what they think about this. And then you'll be able to come back to this body or to the Board of Finance or to me directly and say, hey, this is what I'm hearing. Could we talk about that a little bit? Some of my constituents are okay with it. Maybe others are concerned. This presentation today is meant to sort of kick off a process of building your confidence in education, and I don't mean that in a patronizing way, about this issue, and to make sure that an understanding of all this permeates any decision-making or questions or actions that you guys take with regard to a lot of spending that we have teed up and in the future. It's important to note that this is a high-level presentation meant to talk conceptually about all of this. This is not a Jim Palin presentation with lots of spreadsheets and all numbers tied back with detailed debt service down to the penny over a long period of time. I'm going to let him cover all of that. In preparing this, I worked with him, but also worked with Jill McCammon of the Board of Education, some of the folks who are architects for school construction, Jen Charneski and Rich Rudel, all of that. Everybody's kind of had input into this. So what you're going to see is something that's detached from our normal processes, detached from the 5-year capital plan, but starts to tee up this issue of town indebtedness. So let's get started. So the key concern, as I said, we've got a lot of capital spending, and should we be worried about that? It's a good question, and this is meant to sort of kick off a process to build that understanding. So the issues that I want to focus on is I'm going to talk a little bit about current and historical debt load so that you have a sense of what that is. I want to talk about projected capital spending, and I want to make sure that it's capital spending that's going to be bonded. You'll notice that in every budget we have, there's always small capital spending and some CapEx, say with the fire departments. None of that is typically bonded. As Jack was saying, we're trying to bond things that are north of $1 million. So what we're talking about here is not total capital, we're talking about total bonded capital expenditures. And then once we have that, I want to look at the impact on taxpayers of all the debt service that's associated with that. and then ask another question, which is, well, if we have this extra debt, what about our town's credit rating? Is that going to be impacted, and if so, is that bad? Okay. So the first specific question is, how have debt levels trended over time, and what projects contributed to that debt load? So if you take a look at this slide, this will give you a sense of where we are at the moment. So this dates back to, old and blind, 2015. And you'll see that I've broken the debt out into school-related debt and town-related debt. Now, right here. All right, so what you'll see on this slide is starting in about 2015, we had a debt load of about $77 million, a combination of town and school debt. And that remained relatively flat to slightly declining until kind of 2021. I recall that's the year I handed over the Board of Finance to Jim Palin, but okay, so just checking. And started to build from there. But you see here in 2024, what I've included in that debt figure is all of our bonded debt, as well as the bond anticipation notes that have not actually been converted to long-term debt for Great Island. So when you include all of that, which I'm kind of counting because it's going to be long-term debt anyway, you can see that kind of as of the end of last year and kind of right about now, we've gone from a low on this page of about $60 million in 2019 to now $192 million. And just for context, that's an absolute historic high. Even when we were borrowing for the high school and we had, I mean, as much debt as I ever saw in 13 years on the Board of Finance, we were never anywhere close to this. So part of the reason we're having this discussion is because I saw that and said, we got to talk about this and figure things out. So I've circled a couple numbers here. I've circled 2017 just as kind of a starting point and the 192. And let's take a look at what caused the difference, what got us from the 62 up to the 192. So it's a few things. The first thing is a quick look at the 62. That really is comprised of, as we've done before, school and town debt for the schools. Back at that time, there was still some high school debt in there. Still, we had Tokenete debt that we were still paying off. And on the town side, it was the police department, still a large part at that time, as well as some other debt. So the $62 million kind of is a starting point. Now, since then, we bought Highland Farms, a little less than $7 million. We made the investment in Ox Ridge. You'll see that number is $48 million, even though the headline of the project was north of $60 million. Keep in mind we got some state grants to cover that. There were also bond premiums built in here that reduced our borrowing costs, and so the amount that we actually bonded for that school was about $48 million. We, at this point, have bonded about $29 million in HHR spending. We also have this $90 million in Great Island. That was the $85 million in acquisition costs, plus call it another $5 for startup costs. And then another 15 and so for fire trucks and kind of all of that since then, which takes the subtotal up to $251 million. And then over that time period, we had principal payments of about $59 million. So that gives you kind of a waterfall that gets you from the debt that we had of $62 million in 2017 to what we're facing today in 2024 of $192 million. Okay. So we've answered the first question about debt levels trending over time. Next question is, what additional debt might we expect to take on over the next, call it 7 years? And when would we take on that debt? And this could be additions to existing projects or brand new debt. So I've talked to a number of people about this, and the numbers that I'm going to show you are really projections, and they're meant to kind of provide a directional sense of where that debt could go so we could get our minds around a quantum and a rough timing and take a look at the implications of that. So I've broken this up into some categories that we can take a look at. The first one is if we think about the time period, this is all in millions of dollars, and it's from kind of current fiscal year 25 through 2032. The reason, by the way, I picked 2032 is that it's a date when I think we might reasonably be finished with the next big capital project, which is a renovation of Middlesex Middle School. So over that, call it 7-year period, I think you'd expect that we would do one fire vehicle per year, roughly $2 million each. That's more than we're spending now, but as Jack points out, there's long delivery times and a lot of inflation. My guess is that when we take another look at the fire apparatus vehicle, we'll probably take one of those out of that. The rest of it will be eaten up by inflation. In terms of flooding, we've got 2 projects, as you know, we've talked about before, Salt Box and Grove Street over on near Bailey Avenue. Those projects right now are estimated at 6.5 and 3.5, and over the next couple of 3 years, we'd spend $10 million to get those two projects done. Weed Beach and Pear Tree Point, both of which Jack have talked about, and we'll talk more at a later date. The current estimates on that are $7 million and $2 million. We've asked for slightly more to cover if a bid goes higher than what's the current estimate is, but there's a good chance that we'd be able to get those projects done for the amounts that I show here. And then other, if you look back at our run rate capital in the town budget for stuff, right? Not anything on this list, but other things that are big enough to merit bonding. Over the last 7 years, say for the next 7 years, I merely just projected that forward, and the total bonding for that period would be roughly $31 million. And this is what I want to spend a minute on. So how much money are we going to spend on Great Island going forward? So we already spent the $90 million that we talked about. And one of the things that the Great Island Committee is wrestling with as part of the development of their strategic plan is just how much more do we want to spend. I assure you, we could spend a massive amount of money on Great Island. I mean, anybody who's built a house here knows how much it costs to build it. This is a 60-acre piece of property with a lot of really old buildings. You know how much money we could spend. In my opinion, I think what we should do, and part of the reason for this presentation, is to think about our debt capacity and what we're comfortable with in terms of debt service, and start to say, this is the budget that we'd like to have over the next 5 to 7 years for that project, and then back into a series of things that we would do within that budget. I say that because if you look at Waveney Park up in New Haven, or in New Canaan, and you look over at Todd's Point in Greenwich, they did the same thing. Right? Nobody goes out and spends a massive amount of money to develop those properties overnight. You can't get the contractors to do the work anyway. So there's no reason for us to go in and spend a huge amount of money right away on Great Island. Instead, phasing it in over time, where we have a chance to look at progress, think about the best ways to do things, gather public input, and see how much more we want to do. I think that taking an approach like that makes a lot of sense. Now, the question is going to be, how much money do we want to spend in that phase over this kind of 5-7 year period? Is it $50 million? Is it $30 million? Is it $80 million? I don't think it's much more than $80-90 million over that time period. I'm not sure we could spend that efficiently, but there's a number. And what I want to do is use that number to say, okay, if we just assume that for now, what does our total debt picture look like, and are we concerned? Because if you have that overall understanding, it's going to help all of us be a lot better informed about making a choice to set that budget and say, this is the budget we want. Now go in and let's figure out a smart way to do that so that we maximize the utility of this property for everybody in town. So my stake in the ground, just to start the conversation, is to say, what about $50 million? And let's see what we could do with that. And then once that's finished, say 5 years from now, we could spend another tranche of money and further develop that island. No rush, do it in a smart way, but do it consistent with a view and a strategy about how much debt we want to have. So over that period of time, that gives us a total debt for the town that we would incur of $113 million. For schools, what I have here for HHR, that's the remainder of what we need to bond for the HHR project that's still outstanding, less some state grants, so call it another 53. Middlesex, I had some conversations with a few folks today, including the architects who've been doing renovations for those schools. Just as a cool number to have, anybody want to take a guess as to what it would cost to take down and rebuild Middlesex School? That's a 193,000 square foot building. That's $750 to $800 a square foot to renovate that. You're looking at $150 to $160 million to take down Middlesex School and start over like we did the high school. It ain't the high school days anymore. This is what this stuff is going to cost. Middlesex is actually a building that's in pretty good shape. It's not like Ox Ridge Elementary School, which was a disaster, and we had to take that down. My strong sense in talking to folks is this is going to be another building that we renovate like the 3 elementary schools. And so the question is what would that cost based on a conversation with the architects today? A minimal approach, maybe 40 million, maximum 60 million. I've put in, or 80 million. I've put in 60 million. That's about twice as much money as it is costing now to renovate elementary schools, and those have portable buildings they're having to take out. So if you think just directionally, that feels like a good estimate for a renovation of that building. And again, the architects seem to confirm that today. So could be more, could be less, but to put a stake in the ground in something that feels directionally right, I've got a placeholder of 60 million for that. And then finally, over time, again, looking back, there's an estimate that they would spend another $20 million in bondable expenditures on everything from roof repairs to 35 Leroy to other things of that nature over that 7-year period. Given the schools a total of $134 million, and the total new debt, assuming you believe all those scenarios, over that period to 2032, of call it $247 million. Now, this slide is a little denser, but the only thing I did was I took that $247 million that you see at the bottom, and I said, all right, let's talk about just spreading this over that 7-year period. When might we spend that money? Not much to glean from this, other than I'll point out estimates of when I think this would be spent. Now, by the way, when you talk about bonding, typically you'll have the expenditure and then the bonding takes place the following year, just the way this all works in our planning. And so for fiscal 27, that's when we would bond, for example, Pear Tree Point and Weed Beach. So I have that expenditures taking place then. That's also mathematically when you start to trigger, say, a debt service calculation, because you'd not pay principal in the first year, and then debt service would kick in for the length of time that that bond extends. I've also got Great Island expenditures, so assuming we come up and stabilize our plan and start to move forward with construction work, whatever that is, you can see where I've layered in the $50 million there. And then finally, if we do Middlesex, my guess is that's kind of starting in 2029. Gives a chance for our HHR projects to be finished, for this to be architected, and for that construction to start and that bonding to start. Okay. So now the next question is, now that we have a sense of all that, how does all that translate into additional debt service requirements, and what are the taxpayer implications? So I think if we first take a look at modeling all of this, I have a few assumptions that Jennifer and I have spent time on. I won't talk too much about it, but I just want to be clear that we had to make some assumptions to simplify this discussion. It's consistent with how we've looked at this stuff in the past, so I'm okay with it. We borrowed for as long as we can on every project. Makes sense. 2 years, I misspoke. It's 2 years before we actually start principal repayments, and that's typical of what we've done in the past. I couldn't do anything more than assume current interest rates. I don't know what's going to happen to those, neither do you, so let's pick that. Current bands, which are bond anticipation notes, you put those in place before you actually put in permanent financing. We've assumed that those all get converted to amortizing debt next year. And I've made no assumptions for refinancing. So when I was on the Board of Finance, we typically would do that to take advantage of an opportunity to reduce interest rates on debt. And so that may minimize things in the future, but I've made no assumptions for that. Caveats, cost uncertainty, as I've mentioned, it could be a pretty wide range. Timing uncertainty, does Middlesex start when I said it's going to start? I don't know. And then finally, unanticipated investments. This list might not be complete. That said, so let's take a look at what the projected debt levels would be. So the way this was calculated was we started with the numbers that you recall from over there. So 2024, there's the 192 that you see. You can see how the debt levels will trend over time with all the assumptions that I just did. And what we did was we took those debt levels and we also recalculated, okay, what would the repayment of both principal and interest look like, and can we feed those principal payments into this so you have both growth in the debt as well as like that red box on the chart that I showed before. And you can see that by 2032, we would be sitting at $368 million in debt. That's a big number. But it's important, I think, to lay these assumptions out for everything that we can think of so that we can look at this and say, how do we feel about that? And start to message that to people that we know, to citizens in town, start that dialogue and make sure everybody is eyes open about the decisions that we need to make. So then what we did was the debt servicing, which we calculated at the same time as all this, I wanted to show what this looked like because this will give you a sense of what the annual debt service is going to look like on an annual basis. And so for a long time, debt service has been in the $15, $16, $17 million a year. You'll recall that from budget presentations. You'll see that in this model that get out to 2032, this debt service starts to get up to $27 million. So a lot higher than what it's been historically. And in addition, if you try to say, okay, what does that mean for the average taxpayer? Well, in this case, what we did was to calculate the debt service per $1 million of assessed home value or business value by fiscal year, assuming the current year fiscal 25 grand list, and this is in dollars. So you can see in 2024, of all the taxes you're paying, out of the property taxes you're paying, $1,150 of that was going to debt service. By 2032, you'll be paying $2,450 in debt service. One of the things I would point, well, I'll get to that point in a minute, but that, again, these are the implications of this borrowing. Is it devastating? No, we're not going to wipe anybody out with that, but it's clearly going to be a financial burden that everybody in town is going to need to pay. And then finally, I wanted to look at the debt service as a percentage of the general fund budget. And by general fund, I mean it excludes sewer and parking and that sort of thing. So in talking to Jim Palin, and I've thought about this a little bit myself, one of the things I felt like was maybe a reasonable ceiling to think about for debt service was trying to keep it under 10% of the general fund budget. And so you can see starting in 2030, 2031, we start to get north of that. It starts to get up closer to 11, even up to 12% in 2032. So again, all slides painting the same picture, which says that we've got a lot of prospective borrowing and we're going to have a lot of debt service that has impact on taxpayers everywhere. So the last question I wanted to address is, does this prospective level of indebtedness threaten our credit rating? And what are the implications for prioritizing capital spending? Okay, so for credit rating implications, the first thing to note is that Darien has maintained a AAA, which is the highest AAA credit rating since at least 1994. So that's as far back as I was able to get data. So north of 30 years, we've always had the best possible credit rating. When we get rated by Moody's and they come in and they try to say, okay, well, let's confirm whether you still have a AAA credit rating, they look at a whole long list of things. It's mainly kind of three factors: the overall economy, financial performance in the town, and then of course leverage. And part of the financial performance includes things like our budget process, which, listening to Jack today, it just is a reminder that we have a robust process. The quality of our management, our finance staff and Jen Charneski have won sort of the top award from GFOA for the last, well, since as long as I've been doing this. So there are a lot of factors that contribute to Darien's good credit rating. It's not just our overall level of indebtedness. But that said, we don't really have control over the economy, so we need to focus on our overall leverage as well as our performance as a town. Economic strength, our grand list, all of those things. So we did speak with our bond advisor about all of this and proposed all of this and showed him these are the numbers that we're talking about in terms of prospective debt. What do you think? Is that going to affect our credit rating? His sense was that, taking into account all of Darien and everything that goes into that rating, and the fact that he's actually looked at us for years and years, his sense is that our debt would have to be north of $500 million before eyebrows would start to raise about the level of debt that we're taking on. We're not going to get there, even with the assumptions that even if we add a lot to the assumptions that I put in here, we will never get anywhere close to that in my judgment. He does recommend adding to fund balance if we're going to do that, just to ensure the ratings agencies that we have enough reserves if something goes bad. That's another thing that would add to taxpayer burden, because adding to reserves means that as you grow your reserves, you're actually taxing slightly more than what our operating budgets require. So again, at the point that he made back to us, he said, look, you can do this, but threat to your rating aside, the fact is that the fund balance additions, as well as all this debt service, is going to add a lot of pressure, not just on your budget, but on your average taxpayers. An interesting point that he made, though, is that let's say they did downgrade us by a notch or two, and even with current interest rates, the spread between, say, AAA and 2 notches down from that is only 25 basis points. And so that the prospect of a ratings decrease, in my judgment, is low, given the data and numbers that I've showed you. But even if that were to happen, the interest rate cost of that actually happening on the debt service that we have projected here is in fact quite minimal. So last slide. So what does all this mean in terms of capital prioritization? So one thing that's interesting to note is that by the time they finish Middlesex, we really only have, as far as I know, one major capital project to go. Assuming we hold off on anything else with Great Island, it's probably just a renovation of Darien High School. Can anybody believe this year that school is 20 years old? I can scarcely believe it, but it is. And so the implication of that is that you'll reach an apex in town debt because the way these schedules work is we do fairly aggressively pay down that debt, and you'll start to see the debt service numbers that I described. Those will start to come down in the 2030s because of that. So in one sense, we could make these bets, these investments today, knowing that, except for the high school, our debt service is going to start to, over time, get back to lower levels. It's not going to be a permanent situation. Projected debt levels, in my judgment, and the debt service that I just described, is it concerning? Absolutely. You should all be concerned about that. I don't think that it's dispositive, though, as being a decisive reason for rejecting any capital projects. So as you guys consider that as part of your final appropriation decision, I think things like Weed Beach or other projects, you may decide that those are things you want not to do or want to see modified in some way. But the prospective debt situation for those smaller capital projects, I don't think should be a decisive factor in you making that determination. Instead, what I would do is do what you've always done, which is I've watched this body many times and in at least 2 different roles, and your deliberations on capital projects, take the time to go through them, and in your judgment as the final appropriating authority, does this make sense for this town? You have your feelers all over this town. You will be best informed to help us make that final decision. I'll do what I can from the town side to inform that decision for you, but you guys are in a unique position to help us with that, and I would urge you to continue to do the good job that you do. Which leaves us with really the key decision that's going to have to be made really over the next 5 years. The Great Island Master Plan is coming in mid-July, right? That's the committee that Mark described. That's their focus right now. They've gone into that next phase. And coming out of that, we're going to see lots of options and costs of those options to consider. But we're all going to need to come up with, both the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and the RTM, how much do we want to spend on Great Island to make that the asset that we want it to be for everyone in town, and when do we want to spend it? Because those numbers and those decisions will affect all of this. I'll close by saying that, as I said at the beginning, I really want this to be start of an education process for you all to get more comfortable with these numbers and what they mean, and then to empower you to go out and talk to your constituents and get feedback from them. I want to hear from you. If there's something in this presentation that is a question, you are welcome to call me. You know where I live. Come see me. I'm happy to talk to you about any of this. Jim Palin, I spoke to him several times today and tonight. He's going to follow up with a lot more detail, which is his role in clarifying this and getting down into the nitty-gritty. But at a high level, I wanted to make sure that you guys had a chance to see and understand all of this. I'll be back at some point in the future, particularly if you guys think about this and come up with some questions or things you'd like me to address, or other members of my board or other committees or boards. But let's use this day to sort of kick off this process and make sure you guys are well informed to play your unique and vital role in this process. Thank you for your attention. I hope it's been helpful.
Thank you, John. That presentation was pretty clear and pretty concise. As a body, we need to get a copy of that and get to the point where we feel comfortable with it. I mean comfortable in the sense of understanding, not signing off on it. It's a very good way to track where we're going. It's a good way to refer back to it to see how we're doing and to start making decisions, as John outlined, about how much we're going to spend and where, and then how does it fit into this scenario that he's painted. So get a copy of it, get familiar with it, get your questions together, and then maybe we can find a way to dialogue with John about what's there and where we're going. There are a lot of assumptions in this. The only way you can do a projection like this is you got to make a lot of assumptions. On the other hand, there's the opportunity to use it as a base for comparison when it comes up to individual projects that we think that we must vote on and make decisions about. So I leave you with that. I still have I know, way back inside me, the 17 years I spent as chair of the Finance and Budget Committee here. And so I pass along those thoughts to you because we have something now that we can start to consider when we're trying to make these big-time decisions. So with all of that, Jim Cameron has volunteered to come before us and talk about Channel 79. Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jim Cameron, District 4. We were just given a lot of homework tonight. We've all been told that for the budget process this year, we have to be, in our committees, intimately familiar with the various parts of town government that are going to come with handouts stretched and budget proposals, which means that we've all got to start watching a lot more meetings on TV 79, which I think is just great. I'm going to show you how to make that a little easier, because it is like drinking from a fire hose. We covered up to 15 meetings a week. Not even I can watch 15 meetings a week. I edit them all, but trust me, I don't watch them all. There are dozens of boards and commissions, and how do you follow what's going on with all of these different moving parts? I hope you are familiar with Notify Me. On the town website, if you go up to the search box and you put in Notify Me, you can designate which boards and commissions and RTM committees you want to follow. And every time they put out a new agenda or there's a new meeting video, you will receive a notification. So if you're on, I'm on planning, on public health and safety. So I want to know what the police department's doing. I want to know what the health department's doing. And I don't have to just, keep dragging around looking on the town website, where are the agendas, are they meeting this week? No, boom, I get notified. So that's one easy way of doing it. So what is this TV 79 that we've talked about so much? We started in 2007. I can't believe it's been that long. And I did not start TV 79. David Deaver did. And I give him credit for having the inspiration of doing this idea. We're staffed by volunteers and paid videographers. Most of them are kids from Norwalk Community College. I work with the TV 79 Advisory Board. I am blessed to have Mike Wheeler as our chairman, Carrie Wysocki, who is another broadcasting veteran who is helping us do some new projects as well, too. We have a very hands-on advisory board. Our goal, because I believe as a naturalized American citizen who came here quite legally, by the way, I believe in participatory democracy. And our goal at TV 79 is to make this entire process of decision-making on the town government level as transparent as possible. Nobody in this town should say, they never told me they were going to do X, Y, or Z. Oh, we're going to tell you. We're going to tell you in 14 different ways. But we want you to know what we're telling you, and we want you to participate. So we're trying to make TV 79 as accessible as possible. Not only do we cover every single meeting in Town Hall, we go out of Town Hall to cover events like the Memorial Day Parade, the 9/11 Memorial, July 4th. We have the new Inside Town Hall series, Ask the First Selectman. The First Selectman has been very generous in taking all kinds of challenging, I was going to say nasty, challenging questions from constituents and getting the answers from experts before he just opines himself. The Community Matters series as well, too. My favorite meeting, of all the meetings that we cover on a regular basis, how many of you know what the Operations Planning Committee is? Wow. The Operations Planning Committee is like, it's a meeting of everybody that's important in a decision-making capacity. They met this afternoon, and in about 37 minutes, we heard from the First Selectman, the Board of Finance, the chair of the P&Z Committee, the chair of Parks and Recreation, the chair of the Board of Education, State Rep Tracy Mara, thank you, was there as well too, and our own moderator, Seth Morton. It's all of the important decision makers coming together to tell each other what they're doing. So I really encourage you, if you've never watched it before, Operations Planning Committee. They meet on a monthly basis. Is that right? Excellent. Now, quick poll. I want to know how you watch TV. How many of you watch TV on cable? Okay. How many of you have cut the cord and watched TV on YouTube? Okay. How many of you watch on Dish? Nobody on Dish. How many of you watch over the air? Wow. Well, old school, good for you. Okay. Well, there's a few that you can still pick up. Yeah, that's right. There are a lot of different ways of watching TV 79. And I'm going to show them to you and explain how each of them works, quite simply. First of all, we started and we are indebted to Cablevision, Optimum, Altice. They've changed owners over the years. But if you want to watch us and you want to watch everything, you can watch it live and in living color. We're on tonight on cable. We're also available on Twitter. So even if you're on the train coming home from the city and you want to listen to a meeting, you can watch us live on Twitter. We're on YouTube. We have 2 different channels on YouTube. One carries everything live, as we're doing now, from 4 in the afternoon until 12 midnight. And the other is all the meetings individually available on demand. So you can just go to the one meeting you're interested in. Our website, DarienTV79.com, has all of the meetings, and you can watch them on demand. I'm going to show each of these platforms to you. We also put out a weekly program guide, and we have just added, thanks to Mike's impetus and Carrie Wysaki's, a Best of TV 79 newsletter every Saturday with the highlights and timestamps of each of the important meetings that happened in town. So here's what we look like on Twitter. The middle screen, first of all, you got to follow at Darien TV 79. Please do. But when you do that and we're live, you're going to see that little pink screen across the top there that says, oh, TV 79 is live. You just click on that and then you see what's on the right-hand side, whatever it is that we're carrying live or replaying. So there's a meeting in room 119. And you can start it, you can stop it, you can replay it as well too. We're also available on YouTube. I encourage you, if you watch us on YouTube, please subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. The more subscriptions and thumbs up we get, the higher we will show up in the YouTube search algorithms as well too. So the red arrow indicates that's where you hit the subscribe button. And we will start reminding you on our broadcast signal, please, if you're watching us on YouTube, like every other annoying video on YouTube, please hit the bell, ring the bell, subscribe, and let us know that we're out there. This is the website. And when you go to the website, across the top there's a toolbar that has recent programs, boards and commissions, RTM committees, community matters, Inside Town Hall, First Selectman reports, Ask the First Selectman, and the live feed as well too. And if you wanted to look at a particular RTM committee, for example, just go to the top, click on that, where the red arrow is, scroll down to find the one you want, and then all the meetings from that committee or that board or commission will show up in chronological order from the newest to the oldest. Now, you don't have to watch a 2.5-hour long planning and zoning commission meeting in 2.5 hours. You can watch it at a higher replay speed. Click on the little cog and you can choose, I want to see it in real speed, I want to see it slower than real speed. If you think Jack's talking too fast on F&B, slow him down. More importantly, there are a lot of meetings that you can watch at 1.25% or 1.25 regular speed or 1.5 speeds, and you can whip through a meeting. You can process a lot of information more quickly than it took to record in real time. So that's a nice way of saving time if you want to whip through meetings as well. And again, on the TV 79 website, you can start it, you can stop it, you can pick it up wherever it is you want. Here's what a meeting looks like on the website. So here's Monica McNally at the Great Island Advisory Committee meeting. On the right-hand side, you'll see our newest addition, which is our artificial intelligence summary of the meeting. How do we come up with this? We take the meeting video, we get the audio soundtrack, we turn that into a written transcript, and we put that into ChatGPT and say, give me a summary of this meeting with timestamps. And ChatGPT does its amazing thing, processes a 2.5-hour-long meeting, and in about 30 seconds comes up with a summary of everything that happened in that meeting. Now, does it occasionally miss something? Does it know how to spell Zagrodzki? Yeah, it does miss things, and it doesn't get Zagrodzki right all the time. One of the OPC meetings today, I was looking at the transcript, it referred to Mike Burke, who is the representative on the Blight Review Board. It referred to it as the Blake Review Board. I don't know who Blake is, but he doesn't deserve to get reviewed. So it's learning, but it's still a lot better, I think, than just being able to, slog through the entire meeting itself. You can also click on this little icon, and you can see the transcript of the meeting that was generated, and you could put a word in there or a key word. So, example, if you're interested in the Great Island Advisory Committee and what they're doing with dogs, put the word dog in there and see every time the word dog got mentioned in the course of that meeting. It's really a quick way to jump through a lot of content, to take that fire hose of content and make it a little more manageable. What do we do to help you know what it is that we're up to at TV 79? We put out a weekly program guide. This thing takes me, a couple hours a week just to put this together. This is a list of all the meetings that we have covered this week. And the links you'll see are to the agenda. You can just click on, you get this in your email, you can click on the agenda and say, I see that, what is this? Blight Review Board met. What were they talking about? Let me look at the agenda. Boom. They're foreclosing on properties? Maybe I should look at the video. Then you click on the video, boom, and that meeting comes up. Pretty easy, okay? And I didn't show it on this particular screen, but we also list all the upcoming meetings that we're going to cover next week and the agendas for those meetings as well, too. We must be doing something right. We have 1,200 opt-in subscribers to this newsletter and a 60% open rate. Any of you that work in marketing will know that a 60% open rate for an email is off the charts, okay? I'm thinking about putting advertising in here somehow to monetize this, but no. This is the newest edition. This is Mike Wheeler's creation. This is an example of the best of Darien TV 79 newsletter. If you subscribe to the program guide, you'll also get this. It's like a bonus. It's one subscription and you get both. The program guide comes out on Friday. This comes out on Saturday, every Saturday at noon. It lists the highlights of the meetings, and again, with timestamps and quick summaries of what it was that occurred in each of those meetings. People seem to like the best of. We're getting nice reactions from members of the RTM and others who have seen these ways of simplifying the fire hose drinking process and found it useful to them. Here's how you subscribe. You just go to the TV 79 website, DarienTV79.com, and in the lower left-hand corner, there's a button to say subscribe. Just put in your name, your address, your email. We do not use this email address list for anything else. You will receive no spam. You will receive no offers for Bitcoin or have Nigerian princes in touch with you looking to help share the wealth. We do all this, as I said, with my help, but also with a bunch of people that work very hard. These are the people that really make TV 79 possible. These are the students from Norwalk Community College and elsewhere who work with us and make this all this programming possible. So I take my hat off to them. I make sure they wear that hat when they're ever doing a shoot. But our goal in doing all of this is to help you in Darien avoid being caught in what we refer to as the news desert. We used to have real newspapers in this town. We had two of them. We have, maybe half a newspaper now. It's mostly reprints of stories from Stamford Advocate. They don't cover these meetings. Well, not in person. If there's a reporter in this room, is there a reporter in this room? No. You know what they're doing? They're watching us on TV 79. So good for them. I hope you enjoy this tonight. It'd be great if you showed up in person and actually met some of the people that were involved in all this. So yeah, hard to believe, but we're in something of a news desert. And it is so important to know what is going on in this town, to represent your constituents and reassure them that you're representing them as well as you possibly can, so that they understand what's going on with the budget process. They understand what's coming in down the road in a few years as well, too. So we're here to help you do all that. If you have any questions, if you can't find a particular meeting that you're looking for on the website, you just call me up, you send me an email, I can find anything, and I will be there for you. I also have 2 copies of the rare collector's edition Darien TV 79 car magnet. Purchased by my own pocketbook, I can assure you. And there's a few of these around in town, but if you would like one and you promise to put it on your car, you just come see me. Otherwise, thank you very much for your time and attention.
Great, Jim. Very entertaining. The night is still young, but perhaps you had something else to do tonight. So I'll accept a motion to adjourn. A second, please. Got it. All in favor, please rise.